Weight slamming, music blasting, footsteps on treadmills, sweating, someone screaming on their last rep. That's usually what we visualize when we picture a gym. Now, take that notion and now let's enter a gym on the third floor of a random mall in Tokyo, and you'll appreciate the tranquility and even the hum of the air conditioning. Gyms are no longer just places to exercise. They've become reflections of the societies around them. It's not a black and white question of culture clashes or which is better. It's a question of how does each society shape their conception of how and what a gym really should be. Whether the West or East, going to the gym usually serves the main focus of training, staying healthy, gaining muscle, or just burning calories. But I think they spotlight and emphasize on key different elements which, while yes, I know the broader philosophy will not waver, but the ideal goal and ideal approach becomes more apparent. Of course, I think we are all aware, of the huge differences in beauty standards between America and East Asia, and notably, it obviously ties a lot with body image and the ideal aesthetic for us. I know just from what I can see on social media, one big notable difference is what is deemed as the healthy weight range, especially with K-pop idols. I feel like there's so many discourse from which native Korean fans saying
야 자기 관리 좀 해라 연예인이 빼긴 해야 할 것 같아 얼굴이 약간 크고 통통해서 마른 거 잘 모르는 68에 50kg 미만이면 그냥 해골이야 꽤 많이 빠졌다 야 이 정도면 그냥 연예인 포기한 듯.
And contrasting that with Western fans spreading a more affirmative message with body positivity. But because of the immense societal pressures regarding beauty and having such a huge online presence, I think unfortunately perpetuates that notion to that standard. I know we meme on the whole looks maxing thing, but in Korea, for example, it's just societal expectations. The culture of 자기 관리, or self-management, runs a lot more deeper in Korean culture.
Well, yes, on one hand, I think we can look at it and think it's rather a good thing for everyone to have, but when everyone is trying to outcompete each other, trying to compare each other, the whole notion, I think, rather becomes a 자기 박회. Once that tremendous pressure on oneself becomes a bit too much.
We tend to generalize the aesthetic that Westerners train for the instances of men in particular, performance, mass, and strength, and are celebrated with breaking PRs or personal records. And East Asia, historically emphasizing being lean, having a good definition and posture, a lot of which comes from having a bulky frame being essentially equivalent to a blue-collar job back then, and a lean, slender body being originated with a white-collar job, yet still having the discipline to eat healthy and exercise. But yeah, from a scientific point of view, I think it's also important to acknowledge and emphasize that Asian people tend to generally have naturally a more smaller skeletal frame compared to Westerners, and hence there's probably definitely genetic and anthropological sort of disparity and difference there. That image, for example, in Japan is called hoso macho, essentially slim plus macho, which is like a toned, slender silhouette, with it being much more preferred to the gori macho, with over a 75% preference for the former from a survey conducted. Now obviously it's not as black and white as this. I see, the leaner aesthetics and more bulkier image is becoming more intertwined in both cultures with social media, but their cultural ideology on why people train and its expectations will still affect their approach and ultimate end goal. To give Korea another example, another limelight, something called body profile or body profile. It's quite a unique, extreme example where it was a sort of trend a couple years ago for the ordinary Joe, an office worker, to partake in this sort of rite of passage. Essentially a gym selfie, but instead it's a professional photo shoot to accentuate and capture a person's peak physique. It's pretty much a bodybuilding prep given some of the requirements and preparations that I've read. And most importantly, many do this to chase that visual aesthetic and emphasize those standards even more. A lot of the personal trainers and coaches actually do this, and you'll see a lot of gyms with adverts of them as a way to promote themselves as well as the gym. So when the goal itself is different, it can also be assumed that the environment building those results will be a bit different too.
And to an extent, some unspoken rules or some culture shocks.
Gyms in America and Australia, I think, are generally more loud and social, whereas in East Asia, for example Japan, there seems to be a bit more of a quiet approach to the gym, as we can see with some of the reels. Some of this obviously is contributed by the conservative nature of the society and structured etiquette systems, and comparing to the West, it's usually a bit uncanny if we encounter a silent gym with people. We're more accustomed to, weights being slammed, people grunting, conversations being heard, and generally there's more of a sort of social atmosphere. Not just in Japan, I think you'll see this expectation of a more minimal and cleaner environment with Korea too, where they also require you to have a second pair of clean indoor shoes when entering. You don't necessarily even need to have your own gym clothes, as majority of the gyms will offer and lend gym quote-unquote uniforms, which the customers can then use for the session, and right after that, you can return it and they'll wash it for you. Taking a shower and washing off in the locker room right after are also common practice, which sort of highlights the whole idea of their gym being a bit more isolated to the entirety of the neighborhood/city, and to really uphold the hygiene expectations embedded in Korean culture.
Now, with China, I saw a blog post discussing a foreigner's experience there that pretty much summarizes as, quote, "If a place does not belong to you, it is not your responsibility to keep it clean and tidy." Although I think this is quite an extreme example, I think the atmosphere in Chinese gyms generally tend to be more lax and social, and definitely a lot more reminiscent on the classic Western gyms. End of the day, a gym is a business. We have to pay to get the optimal result with the equipment and service provided.
Western gyms usually revolve around higher volume and a lower cost model, with sort of a reliance on those that have a membership but do not ever go. Whereas in places like Korea, it's usually a little bit more expensive for a basic monthly contract, but becomes more viable when you do upfront payments for a 3 or 6 or 12 month contract, to which they heavily incentivize. South Korea also tends to focus a lot on PT culture, where there is a heavy push and upsell when you first sign up to have essentially a trainer, someone to supervise and guide your fitness journey. And the price does range, but it's usually determined by the gym location, its budget, and its popularity. Usually this ranges from like 5만 won to like 15만 won per hour, per session, mind you. But this whole tactic pretty much makes up the bulk of the revenue, as membership prices are not profitable enough. And so upselling and essentially being a salesman first are usually more favored than actual fitness knowledge. And structure too. Large corporate American gyms are usually a big box, 24/7 garage with huge car parks, whereas East Asia has more denser, smaller, compact hidden gyms among the metropolis and malls, and also usually not open 24/7 unless it was like a big franchise chain. Some of the more nuanced reasons will shed light onto the last part of the video, but again, it's really just based on the fact that real estate opportunities in the West are just a lot more cost effective, and the Asian counterpart just isn't financially sustainable for such a large parcel of land. Though interestingly, despite the peak in fitness, many local gyms are actually slowly fading out with the rise of larger chains. For example, back in Korea, it's materializing into a race to the cheapest mentality, with competing lower prices to entice consumer spending, and being unable to compete with them, are forced to shut down. And I quote from this article, in 2024 alone, 553 fitness centers closed, a 26.8% increase from the previous year. And as a result, some fraud scandals have emerged where abrupt closures have led to prepaid members, whether it's their membership, PT sessions, or combinations of both, with zero reimbursement. In China, this activity is also quite prevalent. Crazily enough, I saw a South China Morning Post with a diabolical title. Chinese man spends 120,000 on 300 gym membership, seeks refund, owner vanishes. Real talk, I'm not too knowledgeable on what the legality and loopholes that they use, but essentially push multi-year packages with personal training sessions, close the gym overnight, transfer the capital, liquidate your assets, and pretty much disappear from social media and the internet. And so with the market collapse and consumer distrust, it sort of led to more reforms and trends in the recent year. One notable trend dominating the market now is a shift towards shorter membership contracts, moving away from the long-term prepaid models. Newer, more convenient gyms like Leke Yundong, now exceeding over 2,000 establishments across major Chinese cities, operates entirely through an app where you can book classes, pay as you go, do short subscriptions, QR code to scan in, stuff like that. In Japan too, we've seen a huge influx too, like Choco's app or staffless Konbini Jimu, including other amenities like teeth whitening. Though, take these with a grain of salt, as they come with a fair share of controversy with false claims of it being 24 hours and utilizing influencer marketing as customer feedback, and with one comment pretty much summarizing the whole thing as a gym for extremely casual goals. But all of these differences, I want to come back to the roots of it and zoom out again to the bigger picture of the symbiosis of the gym and its society. The modern gym no doubt originates from the West. I think back to bodybuilding legends, sport legends, Olympic dominance in the 20th century, and just historically, I think we have to understand and admit that back then, Asia, compared to Western ideals, was economically lagging behind. You know, like post-World War II Japan, post-famine China, post-Korea War South Korea. Like on a grander scale, they're definitely not thinking about exercising as a hobby. And you know, over time through Western influence and ultimately entering to 21st century, and now glancing at the microcosm that is, you know, the post-COVID years, we can see with the aforementioned social media pressures of body images, economic growth leading to higher disposable income, and substantially, mainly from that sedentary, stressful corporate lifestyles, their rendition of a gym has reinvented itself to mold to what their society needs. The massive shift in health awareness and the consciousness with it, you know, with government norms and changing lifestyles, has unlocked a mainstream frontier of the benefits of a healthy, optimal human body. You take for example, you know, the number of registered fitness centers in Korea, and with around $4.75 billion in revenue today, it's on track to hit $7.64 billion by 2030, growing at nearly 10% a year. But I also want to highlight the principles that East Asia lives through, which kind of shapes how these nuanced differences occur. Now, yeah, I got this graphic from LinkedIn, but I'm gonna rock with it. Like, yes, although we can see China substantially has many more gym memberships, it's the percentage amongst the entire population, I think, which tells the entire picture. The general rise in fitness is universal, but Korea's skyrocketed more than risen, I think. You know, with 17% of the population compared to its neighbors. The new, I suppose, term called 온원, or 오늘 운동 완료, also became a trend on social media. It's just the simple concept of, you know, posting a completed workout, which has blossomed a deep culture in Korea that embraces healthy pleasures, not just through fitness, but in diet and through anti-aging, you know, which individuals can now invest their time in themselves. That's why when we explored the whole body profile example and body image thing earlier, it's no secret that Korea's push for aesthetics is deeply integrated into its societal culture. Japan, on the other hand, and I think in my opinion, from what I researched, while yes, you know, they probably do prefer, you know, slender profile, I don't think they feel as much pressure as Korea in terms of body image. And rather than the push for aesthetics, it's the push for your career and your career progression, I should say. They also tend to walk a lot more, and I think partake in more traditional sports too. Interestingly, because of their aging population, the fitness industry actually caters more to the older demographic, and quote, makes up most of the club numbers, end quote, and emphasize, you know, more joint-friendly exercises like swimming and water aerobics. And China is somewhat in the same ballpark. You know, we know on the intense 996 culture, but I think China also promotes a lot more, you know, traditional health methods apart from the gym that remains deeply ingrained with their culture, with stuff like food, Chinese medicine, you know, martial arts, and outdoor activities, right? Like Tai Chi Chuan, that is performed by their older generation. That's also likely another reason why quick, efficient gym styles like Chokozap are a viable option, because of the long working hours of China and Japan and its stress on, you know, efficiency and optimization.
And as we said earlier on why there's so much more 24/7 gyms in the West, the busy lifestyle with work means their physical activity is already embedded into their daily schedule. Or in other words, there simply isn't an emphasis on going to the gym as a separate event. And if we talk about cities as a whole, I mean, remember, East Asia is not car-centric, so the option of opening a 24/7 version means at those late hours with potentially no public transport, it sort of de-incentivizes the reason for going.
General education on this type of fitness is also really not talked about in schools, and even as we may notice on social media, high schoolers going to the gym in the West is a lot more prevalent compared to the East, and that is, you know, likely due to the immense academic pressures and time after school dedicated to stuff like, you know, your hagwon or your bukatsu, etc.
But putting everything together, you know, exploring differences not only through the West and East, but also within those three major countries. As I said in the beginning, it's not black and white.
You know, I see East Asia adopting much of the historic Western ideals, whether it be bodybuilding or gym influencer culture, and the West adopting more on the holistic health side and recovery aspects of East Asia.
And so it doesn't become a question of which is better, but just an appreciation that different systems will ultimately expand the gym as a place which reflects what their respective society values most. post edit here. There are still some things that I actually have to scrap in this video. I think namely the whole Pilates and boutique studio thing. There was also a whole segment where I wanted to discuss like the whole protein foods and like protein supplement differences, but I feel like that could be a whole separate video there. And I know a recent famous YouTuber, Will Tennyson, he also went to Japan and Korea, and I think he did some content discussing the whole differences too there. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching here, and I'll see you in the next video.